Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone. I hope you guys are doing super well. So, today we are going to be looking at this mini grand trine that is about to kick off actually today. Well, because Mars and Uranus are making a conjunction, and both of them are in sextile to Neptune, and both of them are in trine to Pluto. So this is huge, and we are going to be trying the impossible and potentially to look at what this might bring for us in the next 4 years. The reason why I'm saying is that we are going to try to decode it because we have never ever experienced this constellation before, ever. So I looked back in the history and I could not find any time when these three planets would have created a mini grand trine. So therefore, something huge is going down in humanity. And we are going to be experiencing somehow the world kind of like it's a different order. So it should be kind of like super exciting. I think by 2030, especially 2030 onwards, and I'm going to touch base on that as well. Why? But I think we are going to be communicating in a completely different way. We are going to be traveling in a completely different way and so forth. So what we cover today is not necessarily just, July 20th or July 21st, because that's exactly when the mini grand trine between the three outer planets is going to get activated. Okay, so we are going to be talking about the next 4 year window, because I can already see the taglines on Facebook. Oh, July 21st, nothing happened to me. Guys, how do you feel about this mini grand trine? Ooh, astrologers talked about it, that this is big and nothing is happening in my life. Well, because it's going to be out unfolding in the next 4 years. So let me just be very practical right now. Who does have any planet on 4 degree of in their chart, basically? And it could be an angle, it could be a planet. 4 degree, very strictly, this year at least. And then moving forward, the degrees are going to be changing. So next year is going to be 8 degrees. So this mini grand trine is going to be happening 5 times in the next 4 years. So one activation is going to be on 8 degree, one activation is going to be on 11 degree, and on top of my head, there's going to be a 14 degree activation as well. So no joke, this is a very serious one. I mean, this is a mini grand trine, so these should be, in a way, huge. I mean, it should be positive. So, but let's get going. By the way, before we get started, I would like to mention that I'm also very excited because I'm going to be starting a course in September, and it's not astrology related. I'm going to be teaching you how it's been 24, well, more than that actually, 26 years in the making. And I'm going to be teaching you how to analyze drawings. So this is, I don't know how much you guys know about me. Some of you, of course, do, but some of you will not. Um, when I started my spiritual journey, when I was 19, so we are talking about a good 24 years ago, um, I started analyzing drawings. I went to this lady and then she put my life on the table from a picture without saying anything to the clients or anything to her, sorry. It's such a powerful technique, and I highly recommend to those who are parents, for example, and they would like to get to know their children better, but also potentially for medical professionals, because this technique was actually introduced by doctors and psychologists. So they sat down, and in Russia, for example, they still use it on a daily basis, medical professionals. So they are not just relying on, I don't know, certain type of medical devices. They do also, but they believe that the subconscious carries symptoms, and then we put them on the paper. So they look at the pencil as the extension of your subconscious. So we tend to be drawing our traumatic experiences into a picture. So I'm going to be starting a 24-hour course on this. I think it should be enough, but if it's not enough, then we are going to be making 30-hour course. So we will see. Basically, whoever is participating, we are going to be using their drawing so that we can decode it. And it's going to be a very technical class. I'm going to be telling you that if this is the way how you draw a cup, for example, that's what it means. And this is an indication of headache, this is an indication of bowel problems, and so forth. So it's not just going to be medical, because obviously I'm not a doctor, but we are going to be talking about medical elements as well. This is also, we're going to be learning how to fold the paper and then to see what area of life it happened or when it happened. Did it happen as a teenager, or did it happen as for example, it's going to be happening to you in the future? And how it's going to be happening is, if you participate in the class, you are going to be signing up on the class 15 minutes earlier, and then you're going to draw the picture there and then. And I'm going to give you very specific instructions what you are meant to be doing. No questions allowed. So if you are asking me, Victor, what do you mean by that? Well, figure it out. The reason why I'm going to give you a set of very specific informations is because your choices are going to be also super important. So, and yeah, it's an exciting tool. No one has ever done it in English before. At least I'm not aware of it. I've looked it up. No one has ever done it. So surely I believe I'm going to be a maverick with this. But I wanted to hand over this knowledge that I have, because I truly believe that this is a powerful technique. It's also super good for those who are doing consultations with their clients. And you just get them sit down and then draw a picture, and then you can already kind of like cut out the fluff, the stories, because we tend to be starting with Adam and Eve, right, when we have got a bit of a problem, because we are testing the person. So this tool helps you to kind of cut out the fluff and see exactly where the problems are with the client. So highly recommend it. It's going to be starting, I think, on 5th of September, but I'm making an announcement right now. It's an introductory price, so I think it's 222 British pound for a 24-hour lecture. And next month, the price is going to be going up. So if you are interested, this is going to be available in about 4 hours on my website. We're just working on some of extra design. So come and join me in this fascinating tool. But let's get going with oh, by the way, one more thing. If you are a member of mine, okay, on my website, you are going to be receiving a huge discount for this course, but it's because it's not an astrological course. It's not part of my membership program. So that's actually very important to mention. Anything astrology related is available for level 3 members, but this is not astrology. So therefore, it's just going to be a 50% discount for level 3 members on my website. Okay, so let's get going with this very interesting mini grand trine, okay? I mean, probably you have heard of it already. Probably you heard different names as well. Some people are going to call it as a bucket or basket. Some will call it as a cradle. I heard other names to it as well. So I don't want to be giving a name to it. But basically, once Jupiter is in the sign of Leo, and it is already in the sign of Leo, but once it reaches that 4-degree, it's going to become a kite configuration. And we're going to have the Jupiter and Pluto opposition happening, right? But Jupiter is going to be sextiling Uranus. It's going to be making a trine to Neptune as well. And it's making an opposition to Pluto. It's a kind of a kite configuration. Not really a kite, but I'm just going to call it kite, okay? So, but today, July 4th, Uranus and Mars conjunction is happening. So this is actually activating already this planetary configuration, which I mentioned at the beginning of the video. We have never ever experienced it in human history. So this is truly a remarkable one. And we are going to try to figure out what it might mean for us, right? So what really happens is that Jupiter moved into the sign of Leo. So I'm wondering, do you feel, Jupiter in the Leo, do you feel maybe you have to be working on your confidence? I made a separate video about that for the 12 signs, as well as a generic description of Jupiter in the sign of Leo. So I'm not going to be talking about that way too much. But of course, the main element there, let's call it as the catalyst, is going to be the Jupiter and Pluto opposition. And we've got a bit of an tension that is exploding there. Remember, Pluto in Aquarius demands a systematic change. It's kind of like saying that the way we live, or the way we are living right now, is not working. We have to be making changes. And it somehow even wants to expose an objective truth. Now, Jupiter in Leo is coming up with a very creative way to have that control, to have that power, to have that recognition. So, but an opposition often is about a confrontation. So it's kind of like asking, is this vision just kind of like an ego trip? Or does it serve kind of like the larger collective shift? And that's Aquarius. So one of the major questions that might be coming up with that opposition is that who is going to be benefiting from this? Is it going to be the rich, Jupiter in Leo, or Pluto as well, because Pluto represents a lot of money? Or is it going to be kind of like the power is going to be handed back to humans in a way, to us, as in, kind of like low-class people? Obviously, we are not part of the top 1%, right? Or at least most of us. So there is a bit of a doubt going on here. Now, that Jupiter is in sextile to Uranus as well, right? Which is somehow talking to us about a breakthrough. Uranus in Gemini is surely going to be a lot about technological advancements coupled with Pluto in Aquarius. So it really feels like that in the next 4 years, communication, and any type of air industry, such as travel, are going to change so significantly that looking back to, let's say, 2025, most likely we are going to be kind of like giggling a little bit. Oh, do you remember when we used, I don't know, Samsung 26, for example? That's just ridiculous. How could we do that? And nowadays, the kids kind of like, I saw this funny TikTok video recently where a dad gave a Nokia 3320 or whatever that type was, one of those first phones back a good 30 years ago. She gave it to her daughter to try to send a text message. And then it took her a little while to figure out how to use it, because she was like, oh, but the letters are on the numbers and there are 3 letters on it. So how can I shift between letters and so forth? So it became very difficult for her to send a text message. It took a good 5 minutes or so, right? So that's how it feels like with this Uranus-Pluto trine, really. Now, Jupiter, like I said, Jupiter is going to be making the first aspect, it's going to be to Neptune. And that's on the 20th of July. And then on the next day, we're going to be having the Jupiter and Uranus sextile. And, Uranus in Gemini brings a very fast, kind of like innovative idea. Maybe certain type of announcements are being made, brilliant marketing, sudden downloads. A lot of strategy could be happening in those communication fields as well. So what it feels like is that, like I said, with that opposition, there is a reluctance between Jupiter and Pluto. There is a bit of a reluctance. There is a bit of a doubt going on there. There is a clash going on there. So it's like you come up with a brilliant idea, but someone wants to throw it out of the window, because obviously because of their internal fears, or because of being skeptical at the same time, and so forth. Remember, Jupiter in Leo wants to be crowned, right? And then Pluto is kind of like the opposition. And it says, I'm sorry, but I don't think you deserve the crown at all. Actually, it's not a great idea. So, what would we crown you for? I think it's going to be a total mess. It's going to be terrible, and so forth. So there is a public pressure here because Pluto is in Aquarius, right? So the public is pressurizing the king, pressurizing the. It's kind of like when the public is demanding the king to take off the crown. That's exactly what that kind of opposition means. Of course, I'm not necessarily talking about kingdoms right now, okay? So it could be, demonstrations against a certain type of a public figure, a leader, and so forth. Or, Pluto is, like I said, it demands a structural shift. So I'm sure there is going to be certain type of shifts happening in the market or even in finances. Both Jupiter and Pluto are, by the way, I'm going to talk about that as well, but this is the millionaires combination. And this is really talking to us about a major financial change, which might be forcing our hands or even threatening us in a way that our assets are going to get wiped out, for example, if we don't act on something. So it's like, when a public figure, a politician is going to be threatening another country, for example, that if you don't do this and that, I'm going to take away your land or I'm going to be attacking you, and so forth. So we might be even seeing those type of kind of like energy patterns. So like I said, these are getting activated on July 20 and July 21st, okay? But it is going to be lasting for 4 years. So, for example, once Venus moves into the sign of Virgo, it's going to be reactivating the entire configuration again. Why is that? Because Venus will be squaring Uranus at one point. It's going to be happening very soon, by the way. And then obviously the sun is going to be moving into the sign of Virgo at one point. So every single personal planet is going to be reactivating this configuration by the end of the year. So even though if it lasts for 4 years, it really feels like that we are going to start seeing what is happening here. So when you are kind of like analyzing a kite configuration, the spine is always going to be the opposition, okay? And then think of the two sextiles or the two harmonious aspects as kind of like the wings of the kite configuration. But the focal point is going to be Jupiter this month, right? Which is actually making that trine to Pluto as well as the sextile, sorry, not trine to Pluto, the trine to Neptune and the sextile to Uranus. Like I said, I'm going to call it as a kite configuration because it's a little bit similar to it, but it's not really a kite configuration, okay? So if we say that the spine of it all is the Jupiter and Pluto, the kind of like the combat of the visibility and the invisible, or the combat of the underworld and the sky, because Jupiter represents the sky. And Jupiter always thinks that there is no limits. And then Pluto is the underworld, the darkness in a way. So it's the combat of the light and the darkness. And surely it is about a demand for a change. And, Jupiter wants to expand, it wants to be a shining brightly, but it's still a standoff. I'm demanding that I don't want you to shine, basically. Now, one of the wings is Neptune, right? In the sign of Aries. And that Neptune in Aries brings a vision. It brings a pioneering vision, kind of like a spiritual drive to take action. Because Neptune always wants to unite, okay? It wants to bring, let's say, nations together. It wants to It thinks that it's really good for others as well. But often the problem with Neptune in Aries is that it might, like we truly believe that this vision is brilliant for everyone. But because Pluto is opposing, it says you need to understand that it's good for some, but it's not good for everyone. So therefore, we don't want it. Okay, so that's why, for example, Maurice Fernandez associate Neptune as one of the planets which is connected to politics. And I highly agree with it, because politicians do have vision, right? They do want to unite the nation and they want to make a utopian world. Obviously, at the same time, they are going to be stealing from the cash registry as well. But, they do have a vision, right? But that vision is not suitable for everyone. That's what the Pluto opposition is really talking to us about. Now, Uranus in Gemini is very much about an intellectual insight, a brilliant idea, a certain type of technological fixes to a problem as well. So, of course, Uranus and Neptune are kind of like working pretty nicely together right now. Okay, so I can imagine that this is going to be a standout kind of like business connection, for example, between two countries, which we might not have been able to imagine before. Okay, or I can really imagine as well, let's say at your workplace, right? I can imagine that you have been working, for example, in a 9 to 5 job and you feel like unappreciated. And maybe there is the boss or the upper management, and they just hand it down kind of like a policy change, right? And Pluto in Aquarius says that, hold on a minute, this is depersonalizing me. It is taking something away from me. It is crushing my soul. It is stripping away my autonomy. In a way, it's stripping away my human rights. So Jupiter comes into the picture in the sign of Leo, and it's going to be reactive. And it's going to be a pride-driven frustration. And it says, I'm going to walk up to the boss and I'm going to confront them directly and I'm going to demand recognition and I'm going to make a dramatic scene about it because now my ego is somehow bruised. And, but, this kind of kite configuration here, because really I wouldn't call it as a cradle and I wouldn't call it as a basket or a bucket for sure. I wouldn't call it as a bucket because it doesn't have a handle right now. But anyway, whatever ways we want to be calling it, instead of the dramatic kind of like getting into a fight with corporate management, the wings of that kind of kite is going to get activated. And we're going to get this intuitive flash of inspiration. That's Neptune in Aries. We are going to be looking outside our kind of current scope. And then maybe we use a casual conversation, maybe on a messaging app with other coworkers or I'm just going to be updating my resume, Uranus in the sign of Gemini, and I'm going to start looking for a different department to work for. Or even it could indicate that I'm going to go into a completely different field as well. And then you start kind of like collaborating, connections are being made, the phones are buzzing, who knows a better job, and all this type of stuff. Or from a family point of view, I can imagine that with that opposition between Jupiter and Pluto, there is a conflict happening, okay, within the family. And maybe it could even be, imagine that you are actually having somehow a fight with the homeowner or the building management, or you are having a confrontation with the council, or even an ex-partner who is kind of like even making certain type of legal threats. So there is somehow you are being forced to comply with a kind of like a strict but unfair rule. regarding a property or certain type of domestic arrangements. So Jupiter is going to respond to it, right? And Jupiter says, you know what, I'm going to stand my ground and I'm going to be proud about it. I'm going to be protecting my kingdom, my home. So I'm going to refuse to budge out, often because of those sheer principles. Now, is it okay to fight, let's say a local council? Maybe it is, but it can be very exhausting. It could be even costly. So instead of, what if we start activating the Neptune and Uranus, which are the wings here? And it's about finding a loophole, for example, in those living arrangements, something that we haven't considered before. Or we are going to be having a conversation with the neighbors or a legal advisor who might be offering us a very clever piece of, I don't know, paperwork or advice. That's Uranus in Gemini, certain type of clause in that contract. And then because you get this piece of information, you somehow manage to bypass this pressure that comes from that housing association, for example, and so forth. So then Jupiter in Leo is going to be proud in a way that, yeah, you know what, instead of budging, instead of fighting, I found other scenarios. Or let me give you another example, fitness or health related setups, right? Which often is an important topic for all of us. Imagine that you have been on a diet and then you kind of hit that plateau, right? And then instead of, you start looking at, for example, your metabolic hurdle or your hormonal levels and all this type of stuff. And maybe you even visit a doctor and there is a prognosis. And then you just are told that this is how your body works now. You can't really make any type of changes. That's Pluto in Aquarius. So it's an invisible wall there. And Jupiter in Leo comes into the picture and then says that Jupiter in Leo is often about willpower. It's a very aggressive motivation. So it says, you know what, I'm not going to give up. So I'm going to start using Neptune or Uranus. So let's change the strategy, it says. And then I'm going to be doing some, I don't know, different type of visualization technique about, what I want to achieve with my body. Or I'm going to be discovering an unconventional training method, or kind of like this new biohacking tools, or a very unique supplement, for example. That's Uranus in Gemini. And so forth. Maybe, you're going to go for this EMS training or these e-gyms and so forth. Something technological, something unconventional, something that you haven't tried just yet. So what do we see with these three examples, right? We have got a force, Pluto, which is squeezing our pride and joy and that Jupiter in Leo. And somehow this configuration says that the fight is just going to create even more fight. So don't go down on the path of a fight, because if it's a confrontation, somehow it's a failure. Because Pluto is mightier than Jupiter as much as you like it. And Pluto is going to be sitting on that 4 degree a lot longer than Jupiter. So the solution comes from the two outer planets, the wings. One is Neptune and the other one is Uranus. So Neptune is the inspired instinct. And then we're going to have to combine that with some type of changes in our tactics or words or tools or technology and so forth. And then this is going to be able to put you right back into that path that you are meant to be on. And this could be leading to a win. A win comes from the fact that these are very positive aspects. Oh, maybe I should be giving a relationship scenario as well, right? Because maybe you have got a Leo rising sign. So this could really talk to us about that something has become stagnant maybe in the relationship, and then one partner might feel like that they are being taken for granted, or it feels like that we are kind of like just a roommate, or I'm a housekeeper, or or the other party might be just feeling like that they are just bringing the money home. So I want something different in the relationship. Somehow a relationship might have become rigid, cold, or just very focused on rules and obligations and what the society or the family expects from us. So then Jupiter in Leo comes into the picture. There is that starving ego there because I feel underappreciated. So I'm going to throw a tantrum and I'm going to cause a dramatic scene. I'm going to be even picking a fight just to get any reaction out of my partner because I want the partner to at least pay attention to me for 2 seconds. Now, is it worth doing that, or are we going to use Neptune or Uranus? And maybe we're going to just sit down and we're going to have an exhausting talk about the relationship, Pluto. And then that could be just leading to more of a, more wars, right? Or more fights. So let's use Neptune, which says, you know what? It's about kind of like those independent desires. That's about the realization that waiting for the other person to change is a losing game. It's I have to be making some type of changes so that I'm not going to be expecting the partner to give me the validation and that stardom and that kind of kingly, queenly energy that I am craving for with Jupiter in Leo. So we should be deciding that we are going to be bringing something new into our relationship. And I don't know, we're going to introduce a third person. We're going to, I don't know, go on a date, right? And then we're going to travel or whatever new ways of introducing type of stuff can get into. Because Jupiter and Pluto together could create that passive, kind of aggressive games. And instead of playing the game, let's upgrade something and let's send each other playful text messages. Uranus in Gemini. Let's do, I don't know, a naked weekend, whatever the problem is. So Uranus says, think outside of the box, and then Neptune says, let's get inspired, let's have a vision. So the resolution here is that, so I'm not going to repeat myself because I think you can see what the resolution is. So now think about, you might be wondering, let me actually have a look at what you guys saying because maybe there are some questions. Or do we have any questions right now? I can see we are dropping some comments here. My son has 5 degrees in the North Node, Leo, fortune in Leo, 5 degrees. So 5 degree, 4, 5 degree, very strictly. Those are the active degrees. So yes. Aware of Jupiter square Chiron. Yes, I mean, I've spoken a lot about Jupiter square Chiron. Even I actually wrote a bit of an article recently because it was inspired by, again, a TikTok video. And a Hungarian lady who actually said, like, she's a kind of like a motivational kind of speaker, but she does it in a very sarcastic, funny way. And then she holds up a cup which says F you and all these type of things. But she was saying that, you know what, if you are skinny, that's a problem for others. If I'm fat, I'm going to get judged. If you don't have children, they're going to say that you are selfish. If you have got 3 children, or you only have got children because of benefits and housing and all this type of stuff. So she was trying to say that no matter what you do in life, people are going to talk behind your back. And basically her recommendation was that just stop trying to get validation from others. Give a shit to those people's opinion and just live an authentic life. And it really feels like that Jupiter and Chiron square to the T, what she described was the Jupiter in Leo and Chiron in Taurus, as well as Pluto in Aquarius. So this is actually good that you mentioned, because that Pluto-Jupiter opposition is somehow carrying these type of traits. I want to be proud, Jupiter in Leo, because I want to be showing my authentic self to the world. But at the same time, I'm super afraid of doing that, because Aquarius is detachment, right? It's about judgment, social injustice, and social justice related matters. So we end up not doing something because we are afraid of being criticized for it. And the best piece of advice is that, if you're always listening to others, you are never going to be moving from one to two. So just give them a poo, in their hand, and walk away and say that, no, I want to be living my life. Yes, it looks like a basket configuration, yes, but it's a bit funny. Yeah, I have got issues with the basket configuration as well, but let me not get into it. Why? I would not call it fully as a basket configuration, but yeah, most of us are calling it as a basket configurations. I'm going to give you the dates very shortly when they are going to get activated. So, where was I? So now, in order for us to kind of understand the Jupiter and Pluto cycle a little bit better, we're going to have to go back to 2020, 21. Right? Because the most important part of this configuration is the Jupiter-Pluto opposition. So we have to be looking at the initial cycle where the two planets met. So that happened in 2020, right? We had one in April, June, and November, around 22 to 24 degree of Capricorn. So those people who have got planets on 22 to 24 degree of the cardinal signs, but you don't have any planets on 4 degree, you are still going to be feeling that quite significantly. Okay. Now, what really happened there, because Capricorn is like a fortress. So in 2020 onwards, Jupiter, the planet of expansion, beliefs, law, and then Pluto, which is power, control, survival instincts, they met in the sign of Capricorn. And Capricorn is the institution, the top-down hierarchy, corporate structures, but also rigidity and control mechanisms belong there as well. And we know what happened. I don't have to be describing 2020. We all really remember. But, there were really strict rules, and we had institutional lockdowns, and, individuals kind of building those, kind of fortresses in their private lives. So we started hoarding resources, right? We started not doing too many risky things. We were focusing on our survival. We didn't meet people because, we're going to catch COVID and all those type of stuff. So that's where the cycle started, in the sign of Capricorn. Now, 2026 come around. So if we had very rigid rules in the sign of Capricorn in 2020, then it's the breakdown of those rules. That's the breakdown of that fortress that we kind of built up in 2020. And Pluto in Aquarius says, this is an outdated rule. This is not working anymore. We have to be kind of like breaking this down. So 2020, we had the seeding happening, okay? Where we came up with rules, structures. We were relying way too much on governments and authority figures. And, it was all about the fittest survive in a way. And then 2026, because it's an opposition, so therefore we are talking about a peak. So the individuality, it feels like that these rules are restricting individuality. There's no breathing room there anymore. It's kind of like, it's like it's a faceless type of system, right? So no one sees my face. I don't know, everyone is looking at my electronic numbers and stuff like that. So somehow the humanity got sucked out of our lives. And then we start kind of like fighting back on this. So if in 2020, I don't know, some of you might have worked from home, right? or maybe you went on a strict diet, or you had a very interesting work schedule, or you had a new boss coming in, for example, and then throw everything upside down, then this is the peak of that. Maybe that boss is going to leave. That boss is going to resign. That boss is going to get fired, for example, and so forth. Okay, or you started a very strict diet in 2020, like I did. So now that somehow shows up with this opposition that that diet doesn't work anymore. I have to be doing something completely different. So, maybe I want to go back to Thailand and then do a 7-month interest retreat again because I want to be losing weight. And then this opposition reminds you that that way you are not going to be losing weight. That's just going to become a waste of money, for example. So those rigid protocols is a prison sentence right now. And the body and the spirit are kind of pushing back on it. And maybe it's because it's exhaustion, or maybe it's boredom as well, or I'm tired of doing something by the book. So that's why we are breaking the rules here. That's why we cannot be disciplined anymore. And somehow Jupiter in Leo says, I'm just going to prioritize vitality, joy, and play. I cannot be eating just salad, for example, all the time. I need to find ways of being able to eat, I don't know, cakes or whatever you like. Or think of a relationship scenario as well. So maybe in 2020, we were locked down, and we made our decisions based on security, or many of us stayed together with their partners because we were kind of holding the fort together, right? But now there is a strain happening, and the relationship feels like kind of like a bit of a prison. We still have got the chores, but now you've got you can go wherever you want, right? So maybe we kind of feel like that we are just a cog in a wheel somehow, and I don't want to be part of it anymore. So it can be a decision-making point that I'm just going to walk out of it. Maybe peacefully, maybe quite dramatically, but I want to choose happiness. So these are just a couple of examples there, really. So remember, this is going to last for about 4 years. And for me, it really feels like that Pluto is trying to hold on to power. It wants to increase the power. But so I think it's going to be very interesting, the next elections. Yeah, I think it's going to be very interesting with these. But when Jupiter and Pluto kind of gets together, it can be kind of like a dictatorship as well. That could be really the negative side of things. And we just kind of want to get rid of that dictator type of egotistical person. So maybe someone is going to believe that, I don't know, the election is in the bag, and it's not going to be in the bag. But Pluto in Aquarius also is about a concentrated kind of power in any type of faceless systems, AI algorithms, technology. I think, this digital networking and banking, or it's like a collective surveillance mode. And I'm trying to increase my power by anything that is trackable or automated. And Jupiter in Leo says that, where is my sovereignty there? I'm going to become a charismatic leader. I'm an independent creator, and I demand absolute autonomy. And I'm going to be increasing my power through visibility or my personal brand, or so I think it might be the birth of a political leader who is going to somehow shock the world. And we would never expect that person, let's say, to be elected, but still going to be elected somehow. I think there is a bit of a battle of ideologies and information happening here as well. It's a bit of an information warfare, or it's kind of like an intellectual dominance also. It's like, who is controlling the media? Who is controlling the AI models? Or, or kind of like the new power is AI. I mean, did you guys hear, just from an investment point of view, because Jupiter and Pluto is the millionaire's midpoint, by the way. So what it means is that you have to be looking at where the midpoint, the halfway through between your Jupiter and Pluto, and if there is a planet sitting on that, very strictly within 1 degree, that is your millionaire planet. That can bring you a lot of money. Okay. So for example, I've got Pluto 29-degree Libra, Jupiter is on 7-degree Sagittarius. So what's the halfway between those two? 18-degree Scorpio. So do I have any planet sitting there? No. But it's not just Scorpio. It could be Taurus, it could be Leo, or it could be Aquarius. Okay? So I've got Sun sitting on 17-degree of Aquarius, 16.55 to be precise. It's a little bit far off, unfortunately. It's more than a degree. So very tight orbs we use here. It should be less than 1 degree, and mine is 1.2. Okay, but I can do something with the Sun in Aquarius in the 12th house. Okay, so that's how this works. And what was I going to say? So I think we're going to see. Oh, yeah. What I wanted to ask is, did you guys hear that AI last year consumed more water than us humans altogether? That was last year. So it feels like, Neptune is in the sign of Aries. The water is too hot, so it's evaporating too quickly. So that straight away made me think, is it a good idea to invest in water, in water companies? Because, and then now I also heard that the solution might be that we should be putting these AI farms into space, or at least Elon Musk is thinking about that. Now, we do know that Elon Musk has got the SpaceX, which is, I think, sitting on $162 right now, but at one point it reached 220, but then it went back to 160, so 150, and then now it's kind of going back up. But Elon Musk is thinking about trying to put these AI farms into space. Okay, so the question here is that, are these good investments? Because Jupiter and Pluto is the millionaire's midpoint. Regardless of an opposition, it is a money generator. It's just the opposition, how it works is that some people are going to become very rich with it, super rich, even with an opposition, and some will lose money. An opposition in between these two giants are kind of like, your loss is my luck. So therefore, I'm going to buy your company because you don't have money, and I'm going to give you a couple of pennies for it, and then I'm going to build an empire out of it, and it's going to make me super rich. Okay, so there is a lot of investment opportunity with Jupiter and Pluto. And I'm thinking water, SpaceX, some technological ones are surely. I also heard that Elon Musk, next year they are going to be launching these robots that are working right next to conveyor belts. And one robot was able to work for 4 days without any type of charging and so forth. So they want to be introducing that next year. I never take responsibilities for any of your investments idea. I'm just kind of giving you some tips and hints, what I would think of. I'm really thinking of water, because according to some of the experts, water can become a major issue if AI carries on like this until 2030. Okay? So, yeah, we will see about that. So I think what we need to be watching for, especially with Jupiter, is like in Leo, bosses, ex-partners, or family figures, who kind of tried controlling us in 2020, for example. And then now it might be coming up as a period of time when they are trying to tighten the grip, on us. Because often with a Pluto opposition, it's like the power is sleeping. So when the power is sleeping, what are we going to do? We are going to become even like we're going to become even colder, more rigid, or we're going to come up with certain type of rules, policies to kind of force the compliance. And this is where the rebellious side of things are going to be really coming out in the next 3 years. Now, like I said, we don't have historical data, but when we look at the very last trine, for example, between Jupiter and Pluto, it happened in 1921. And then previously we had one in 1884 to 1885 as well on top of my head. So the last trine between Jupiter and Pluto was when I think it was 6 degree Pisces, 1921 to 6 degree Cancer. And we actually had 3 trines between those two planets. So I had to be looking up what happened in 1921 when this trine went down. Well, a radio and mass media revolution started really there. That's the year when the commercial radio broadcasting kind of took off globally. And that was the first time in human history when millions of people were able to listen to kind of like the exact same voice or music and stuff like that. The silent film industry started blooming very significantly as well. And that was the very first moment when the first global celebrities and movie stars kind of like started coming up, really. And but also that was a period of time which is a bit more watery. However, Jupiter and Pluto is always about money as well as something to do with influential people. But it was also the rise of psychoanalysis. So it was Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung's work got popularized, really, and we started becoming more obsessed with digging into the subconscious dreams and even family dynamics. Obviously, that's the Pluto in Cancer. So, if 2000, 1921 brought us that wireless radio, for example, then 2026 is surely about something, and 2026 and onwards is that AI, the global communication infrastructure is changing, or that human psychology, that started in 1921. I think it might be the exploration of the human consciousness, but through chips and machine intelligence and digital spaces and, a lot of brain activity, a lot of brain discovery. And this is one of the reasons why I decided to announce the course, this drawing test, because it's very psychological. And I think it fits that Jupiter and Pluto kind of like trine a little bit so that we can explore a little bit more from our subconscious mind as well. And by the way, I also looked at, when we had the Pluto and Uranus conjunction, because that is the seeding moment. And the conjunction between them two happened 1966 in the sign of Virgo around 16 degree. Well, we had 3 conjunctions also, but 16 degrees is the last one there. So what really happens is that, again, remember, cycles are all about an initiation point. And 1966, if we planted the seeds in the sign of Virgo, what is Virgo? Small details, microscaling, efficiency, processing data, labor, biology. So in the mid 60s, did you know that that was the birth of microchips? So I'm sure that microchips are going to become a huge stuff in the next 4 years. Now, the silicon microchip became something that went into mass production in the 60s. And let me not just go into it because I'm not really sure how it goes. But also that was the modern computer network. That was that development of the packet switching. That was the foundational technology of that ARPANET or whatever it was called, and it went live basically. So that kind of gave the conception of the internet. So this Pluto Uranus should really talk to us about certain type of major technological changes or how the internet is going to be changing. But from a biological side of Virgo, 1966 was the exact year when the genetic codes got cracked. Basically, they were able to map out how a DNA triplets translate into amino acids. So it turned human biology kind of like upside down. Human biology kind of became a code that could be read and edited. So I'm very certain with the Pluto Uranus trine in the next 4 years, we're going to be able to reverse certain type of illnesses, for example. We are going to be able to reverse, like aging significantly. And I'm not talking about plastic surgery. I'm going to be, I don't know, you get an injection, for example, and then, I don't know, you wake up, 20 years younger. Maybe I'm sounding silly and maybe this is not how it's going to work, but trust me on that. It really looks like that's the way we are kind of like going on that. Something to do with the hardware as well, because Virgo is like machines, like the physical machines and so forth. So I think somehow technology will leave the physical box and everything is going to be cloud based. Everything is going to become decentralized somehow. It's like, I don't know, the data is going to be in the air around us. You know what I mean? Internet, like 1966, around that time, we laid down the cables and, we created these centralized databases. I think actually what's going to happen right now in the next 3 years is that maybe we won't need those cables somehow. So surely kind of like a web-free type of revolution that I'm kind of like imagining that, or thinking of that genetic codes. So I can actually imagine that AI is going to be able to edit, you know, like our biology somehow. I know it sounds really scary, and most likely many of us are going to like we are afraid, right? Because these sound very scary, but it really feels like that this is how we are going. So like I said, Jupiter and Pluto is really about investment opportunities, and don't expect it to go up right now. But what I've noticed is that 2030, when we're going to have a Uranus and Mars conjunction happening also in the sign of Gemini, I think we're going to have 7 planets in the sign of Gemini, but we're going to have Jupiter in Libra, and we're going to have Pluto in Aquarius. So I think we're going to start seeing these in 2030. We're going to have 7 planets in the sign of Gemini. It's going to be Sun and Mercury. We're going to have, I think, the nodes around Gemini as well. We're going to have Venus there, Mars, Uranus. A lot of stuff is going to be happening in the sign of Gemini. So that's when I'm kind of like thinking that everything is going to start kicking off. So until then, we need to be kind of like looking at decentralized storages or computing, a computing power that doesn't rely on a single massive tech farm or server, you know, um, because I think that's going to be a good investment opportunity for many. Or I can imagine systems that somehow protect the individual data, identity. I mean, Gemini could really talk to us about traveling as well. So surely we're going to see that we're not going to need someone to sit there at the border control, and then checking your passport. You're just going to walk through. And they started doing such things in Dubai, and this is going to become even more massive. Everything is going to get automated, really. I think it's like you're moving away from this generic chat box And then we're going to have those AI agents, which are going to be able to handle very complex, very multi-step workflows, like accounting and so forth. What I'm really wondering is that we all have to be coming up ways of becoming self-employed. And Jupiter in Leo is surely about that personalized, what's the word I'm looking for? That personalized service that I can give you, which like a computer is never going to be able to kind of take away. Where the service comes from, because the seeding happened in the sign of Virgo, which is a service industry. Right. And yes, we're going to see that, I don't know, robots are going to be serving you. I've seen actually recently that video where it was, I think, a Starbucks, and then you walked up, a robot took your order, and the robot went to make the coffee as well. It was in Japan, maybe. I've seen a Hungarian influencer showing how the robot was serving the coffee. And the robot was even dancing a little bit while you were waiting for the coffee. So the robot tried to kind of make you laugh and entertain you as well, so that it doesn't feel too robotic. I know it sounds scary. And then obviously Virgo, which is about service industry, which is about work opportunities. So what does that mean in our lives? It means that many humans are going to be replaced. So that's why we need to think of that, Pluto in Aquarius as in social media influencers, and what can I do with technology? How can I fix a phone? Or, these service industries, I think, should be working. But anyway, I don't want to drag it along. And I know this is a sensitive topic because I'm going to be reading in the chat box below. But no, I'm never going to be doing this and that. I'm never going to listen to AI. And that's fine by me. But I think but the bottom line is that that's where we are heading, That's where we are heading, whether we like it or not. So let me see what you guys are saying. Sorry for clarifying. Can I count 33-degree aqua as a point of trigger here, or too early? Yeah, I mean, okay, so let's do it between 3 to 5 degree, okay? Because, that's already on the 4th degree. And the reason why this year I would be looking at the 333 is because the Uranus-Mars conjunction happens on 3 degree and 47, or 3 degree 52. So it's close to 4 degree. So this year it is important. Are we facing another pandemic? Can it be because the price of oil raises again so much that we might not be able to move anywhere? I don't think it's going to be another pandemic, really. I don't think it is in the cards right now. Or if it's a pandemic, it's very much blown out of the ballpark. They make it sound more dangerous than it is. But if something does come about, the collective will be a lot harder to full force, etc. Pluto, yes. It feels like this will the common ground to start a revolution against AI. It could be something like that, to be frank, and I wouldn't be shocked. Uranus-Mars cycle in the sign of Gemini is going to be happening, 4 times until the cycle finishes. So think of Uranus-Mars conjunction. The last time in the sign of Gemini was between 1943 to 1947. So I think they made only 2 conjunctions or something like that. 3 potentially. Yeah. So what was going down around 1943, 1941, right? So I don't have to be talking about that. So I wouldn't be shocked if it was more of a demonstrations against AI and how AI is replacing our jobs, and people are kind of like tired of that, and we want to make money and all those type of stuff. So I wouldn't be shocked at all. Yes. Do you see the big AI bubble burst? Yeah, I mean, it could show something like that. I mean, there could be some technical problems with it and so forth, and the accountability of that, and people could be standing up against that. But then it would get rectified. They would make it even better. Oh, digital identity is rolling out in Australia at this point. Wow, interesting, really. Okay, 1921. Yeah, that was the suffragette movement as well around that time. You are right. Yes, and 1970 was the first test tube baby, the beginning of IVF too. That seems scary then. Absolutely, that was around that time. So I'm guessing, the kind of like initial experimentation started somewhere around that 66-ish, which is again somehow Virgo related. Virgo is one of those barren signs. So we have got three barren signs: Gemini, Leo, and Virgo. Now that's actually an interesting point, right? Because Jupiter is the planet of one of the planets that is connected to fertility, and being in the sign of Leo, it's a barren sign. So even though there might be, and Pluto is pushing against Jupiter, so it could feel like that even though they are trying to roll out certain type of new things this year, somehow it feels like it's not gonna happen just yet, or it's gonna get slowed down big time. I think an air concentration can be tougher on humans than the Aries fire lineup, nerve frying. I mean, Gemini is about your nerve system, and we can get super scared of things as well. Yes. I do believe that we are on the verge of, when it comes to human interaction, I think we are on the verge of, like, we are not interacting anymore. I mean, it's so crazy. It's just crazy. We are not interacting that much anymore. Let's just be frank. So, guys, this is my insight on the Uranus, Pluto, Neptune. We have never experienced this in human history. So remember that astrology is about pattern recognition. That's why I tend to believe that astrology is not an intuitive kind of like sport event. It's all about going back to the past events, looking at when it happened, what that brought to us, and so forth. But we never experienced this combination so far at all. So therefore, to figure out what it might bring is a bit difficult. Now, I did look at some past charts, by the way, and I looked at when the Uranus and the Pluto trine happened, for example. But also, we should remember that Neptune wasn't in the picture. Okay, so therefore, Neptune at that time was in the sign of Leo. Yes, it was in the sign of Leo. Pluto was in Cancer, and then Neptune was in the sign of Leo. So it wasn't in the picture, So I started looking at these, but the three planets never kind of came together. So this is a really super unique combination. And that's why I say that if you have got any planets between 3 to 5 degree of any of the signs, the next 4 years should be huge in your life. And hopefully, instead of using, let's say, the Jupiter Pluto opposition, you are going to be using the wings that I have explained to you at the beginning through numerous examples how I would use those wings. So the other degrees are every single year until 2030, it's active. So I'm going to give you the degrees. Just a second. Let me pull that up. So here you go. Replace. And so we are having one right now. We're going to have one in 2026, November 29th. And that is happening on 3 degree. Then the next combination is going to be happening June. Oh, it's very easy to remember, by the way, because until 2030, every single of them is happening around June. So it's very easy to remember. But then we're going to have a June 15th, 2027. The degrees there are 6 degree, okay? 6 to 8 degree. Then the next one is 2028, January. The degrees there are 6 degree again. 6 and between 4 to 6 degree. Then the next one is 2028 June and 2028 August. I'm going to give you the degrees there as well. That's 8 degree. And then the August one is going to be, I guess, on 8 degree as well. No, that's 7 degree. And then the last one is 2029 June again. And that's 15 degree. 14, 15 degree. Okay, so these are your activations. And then we've got actually a 2030 as well. So let me give you that degree also. Which is 2030 June again. And that is 12 degree. So these are your activations, guys. So thank you everyone for watching. I hope it was helpful, and I should see you tomorrow when we are going to be looking at a bit of a general weekly forecast. And we're going to be looking at how July 6 to 12 is going to be playing out. We have got Saturn and the Sun square happening. Some asteroids are changing sign. We're going to have Mars trining Juno retrograde, Chiron sextiles North Node, while Venus conjuncts the South Node. Moon goes out of bound again, of course. And we're going to have the midpoint of the Mercury retrograde starting on the 11th as well. Not the busiest week. Actually, we're going to have 4 asteroids kind of like to talk about, because Panacea will enter Libra, Toro will enter Scorpio, and Phaeton will enter the sign of Cancer. So we are going to be covering that in my tomorrow's live. Thank you, everyone. Have a great weekend. Take care. Bye-bye.